It was my youth, too, that made me proud enough to ask to sit at the right hand of Jesus in heaven. In those 3 years with the Master, I learned how to follow and to love. I became known as the disciple who Jesus loved. I stood at the foot of the cross with Mary, the mother of Jesus, near enough to hear him speak. It was there that he honored me with the charge to care for his mother after his death. I was very young when he was killed. I went from the cross to a life of teaching and building the Lord's church. The youth and, Youth need not be a hindrance. The energy and enthusiasm of youth is needed by Christ to build his kingdom on this earth.
I am Simon. Some of you call me Simon the Zealot. I guess I was a zealot because before I married Christ, I was part of this religious organization that would not hesitate to murder or sabotage to achieve our goals. I did all this and so much more, yet Jesus called me to follow him. Me! Well, I did. I followed Jesus, and he showed me a different way. No more did I believe that Jesus was here to help us overthrow Rome. He was here for a different purpose. He came into this world for us, for our salvation. I finally learned this, and when I did, I wholeheartedly gave myself to him. Does such a change in a person like me sound like a miracle? It is a miracle, and it's one any of you can experience if you will follow Jesus and give him your heart and your love.
I am James, son of Alphaeus, called James the Minor by some. Not a word that I spoke is written in the Bible, nothing but my name. Because of this, I am called the forgotten follower. Although it is a hard role for some people to understand. Peter's boldness assured him of being known through all of time. The brashness of the sons of thunder assured them of being known through all the ages. But is it the credit we receive while we're alive that is important? Though I am forgotten, still I was a disciple of Jesus, chosen by him to follow him during his ministry here on earth. Appointed by him to feed his lambs after his death, admonished by him to continue to spread his message. To have been a part of this is all that matters. For me, just to be one of the 12 is the most important.
I am Thaddeus, better known as Thaddeus. I served the Master for 3 years. brought us to this table. This table, we found out later, was a table of death. Jesus didn't fear death. This was a hard lesson for us to learn. But this is what we all did. We learned from our master. And all that's what matters.
I am Judas. It was I who became angry when Mary anointed Jesus with the costly ointment. Why was it not sold and the money given to the poor, I demanded. The others appointed me as their treasurer. I stole from the very bag that the Son of Man bought his daily bread. I betrayed Jesus with a kiss. For 30 pieces of silver, I sold my master and my soul. My shame compelled me to fling the money from me. My shame came too late. There was only one thing I could do. I ended my life by my own hands. I shall be known throughout time as the traitor.
I am Andrew, the brother of Peter. I was the first to be called, and I brought my brother Peter to Jesus, for I knew when I first saw Jesus that he was the Messiah. I brought many to Jesus when I was with him. When I was in the desert with the multitude of people, it was I who brought the boy with the loaves and the fishes to Jesus. It was a pitifully small amount of food, hardly enough for even the boy, but somehow I knew Jesus could do something about it. And it was I who brought the band of Greeks at the feast of the Passover to Jesus. For I knew he wanted to speak to them. I brought many people to Jesus while he was here, and I continued to bring many people after he was gone. I did not have the fiery nature nor the outward tongue of my brother Peter, but I still was able to find a way to serve in the background. Yes, even in the shadow of Peter. And there was no jealousy between Peter and I. For to serve Christ was honor enough. There was no place for pettiness.
I am Philip, called the practical one. At the feeding of the multitude, it was Andrew who brought the boy with the loaves and fishes. There's a lot more dialogue, but finally, let your practicality be tempered by faith.
I am Nathaniel.
I'm also known as Bartholomew. It was Peter who brought me to our Lord with the words, "Come and see." It was his response to my cynical question, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" But my cynicism melted away the moment he saw me approaching and said, "Behold, an Israelite in whom there is no guile." You see, I was at the wedding where he performed his first miracle. He turned water into wine, and it was good wine. And I was among that small group of disciples who fished all night with no success. You can imagine, as he stood on the shore and said, "Try the other side," how we might have had little enthusiasm. But try we did, and our nets nearly burst with the catch. It was a good lesson to remember for many times afterward. When we look back as fishers of men, we'll recall sometimes, no matter how tired or cold or hungry, sometimes success requires one more cast.
Prospect for discipleship. Before I gave myself to Christ, I was a tax collector, hated by the Jews, for I collected money from them for the Roman invaders. It was a well-paid job, and I was wealthy. But when Jesus came while I sat at my desk and said, "Follow me," I did not hesitate. I rose and followed him. There was another wealthy man, a rich young ruler, who came to Jesus, but chose not to follow him. He would have to give up his worldly riches. It was no easy decision. I knew of Jesus before he came to me that day. All the land was humming with stories of his great deeds. I heard his words when he gave the Sermon on the Mount. And for a time, I considered going to him, and considering offering my services. But how could Jesus use me, a publican, despised by his own people, to help with his work? It was when he came to me that this matter was clear. With Christ, it is not what you have been or what you are that counts, only what you might become.
I am Thomas, also known as Doubting Thomas. I was very loyal to Jesus until that night he was arrested, and I literally walked away from him. The more I thought about it, I became very depressed. I didn't want to be around anyone. Then a couple weeks had passed, and one of the disciples saw me, and they said that Jesus had returned and talked to him. Well, being the doubting person, I said, there's no way this could have happened. They said, well, he is going to come back. I said, well, let me know. I want to be there. So on that day that Jesus was to reappear, I was there. I noticed the disciples, and there was a man walking around there, which I really didn't recognize. Then he approached me, and he says, Thomas, do you know me? And I says, no, I don't. Then he took my hands, and he rubbed them on his scars on his wrists. And I looked up at him, inquisitively, And then he took my hand and put it inside his garment to feel the scar from the wound that was on his side. I stopped, I stepped back, and I looked at him. You are Jesus. You are my master. I will never doubt Jesus again.
I am Peter, called a rock by Jesus. Though I watched the Master heal lepers, return sight to blind eyes, and raise Jairus' daughter from the dead, he even healed my own wife's mother, and I still did not know who he was. None of the disciples knew who he was. But then the words came, "Thou art the Christ, Son of the loving God." It was I who miraculously walked upon the surface of the Sea of Galilee. But I became afraid, and because of my fears and my doubts, I sank beneath the waves. "Help me, Lord," I cried. And with a touch, just a touch of his hand, my fears and doubts were gone. It was I who impetuously cut off the ear of the high priest's slave in the Garden of Gethsemane. Peter the bold, Peter the brazen, willing to fight armies for my Lord. But then I ran away. And a short time later, I failed him again 3 times, as signaled by the crowing of the cock. But there is much to be learned from my fears and my doubts, for those who would follow in his footsteps, and as I have done, become a fisher of men, can also one day hold the keys to the kingdom in their hands.